This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 27th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. The purpose of today's hearing is to seek feedback from local practitioners of complementary and alternative medicine, abbreviated CAM, on the potential benefits of traditional medicine to the treatment of non-communicable diseases in Trinidad and Tobago, and also to explore the issues associated with the regulation of these types of medicine. This meeting is not being broadcast. The witnesses for today's hearing were selected in consultation with the Ministry of Health and from the committee members' own research. At this time, I'd like to introduce the local practitioners, or allow you to introduce yourselves, and after that we will allow the members of this committee to introduce themselves. So if we could start with Mr. Ramkisoon.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. I am Marcus Ramkisoon. I am a local cannabis expert. I'll just take a quick minute to explain what that means because it's a relatively new field. I have a Bachelor of Science in Life and Research Sciences. I'm a research scientist by profession, and I also possess 73 qualifications in cannabis. 43 of them are CME or continuing medical education courses, which are normally reserved for physicians. I also provide through Caribbean Cannabis Institute, my registered non-profit organization in Trinidad, CME courses for, yes.
We're going to give you a full introduction.
Oh, I didn't understand.
All right,
that.
just your name and your organization for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Morning. My name is Philip Franco. I am a herbalist and naturopathic physician, and I've also founded the association NAMA, Natural and Alternative Medicine Association.
My name is Ernest Hazelwood.
On your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Ernest Hazelwood, founder of Vibrant Health in Barataria, and I am the chief person there operating in Vibrant Health.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Lionel Myers. I'm an acupuncturist, doctor of Oriental medicine, also hypnotherapist and various others. And I founded the Soul Mind Body Renewal Institute in St. Augustine.
I am Dr. Asante Van West Charles LeBlanc, a general practitioner, a medical herbalist and acupuncturist, and the medical director at Victoria Clinic.
Thank you very much. Allow now members of the committee to introduce themselves.
General Ansel Antwine, Member of Parliament, W. Mira, Member.
Glenda Jennings-Smith, Member.
Christine Nuwala Hossain, Member.
And I'm Paul Richards, the chairman of the committee. We remind that for procedural sake and for the maintenance of order, members and guests are invited to direct their concerns through the chair. Members will pose questions and you're free to, of course, elucidate as you see fit. We'll also remind members that you officially can ask to activate your microphones so that we can record it properly when you are acknowledged by the chair, and turn it off when you've concluded your contribution. And you are those who are with us before us today, but we've also saw the expertise of many other stakeholders through written contributions and documentation. So we try to be as wide reaching as possible. We got quite a healthy response from alternative medication or CAM practitioners in Trinidad and Tobago, which I guess augurs well for the progress of the industry. All right, at this point, I'm going to now invite our guests to each make a 2-minute opening comment. Anything you'd like to start with, starting with Mr. Ramkisoon.
Let me apologize about that first.
That's quite all right.
Okay, so within my qualifications, as I was just continuing, I possess CME qualifications and 30 industry certifications. I'm regarded as one of the highest qualified on paper persons in the world in cannabis, and I've actually just been hired by the Antiguan government as their sole advisor and consultant, and I've just finished drafting with their legal drafter, of course, because I don't know legislative drafting style, their Act, Cannabis Act 2018, and the 180-page statutory instruments that would follow it. I am not a complementary alternative medicine practitioner. I do not treat patients at all in that regard. I am strictly in this level a consultant and an advisor, amidst other things within the cannabis industry, but nothing to do with treating. Thanks.
Well, I'm very happy to be here and to be able to contribute to this committee in looking at whether or not natural products need to be regulated, and looking at the existing regulations that make no mention of these products within the archaic regulations or the Food and Drug Act of 1960. And something needs to be done because it is very difficult for persons trying to import these products to import them. While you can go online and buy them, but if you want to legitimately bring them in, we are posed with much difficulty at the Food and Drug Department of the Ministry of Health. So something needs to be done. I have suffered over the 20 years that I've been in practice in Trinidad because of this, and many others as well. Some people have given up and gone out of business. So something needs to be done, and hopefully this is the time where we can do something about it.
Thank you. Dr. Hazelwood.
Yes. My journey started at Howard U in Washington. Then I went to the School of Natural Medicine in Utah, and then, of course, at the Bastyr College, Bastyr University. I became very much interested in alternative or holistic medicine as a result of my spiritual interest. And I realized that the body cannot heal itself without the mind. So I journeyed to India and studied Ayurvedic medicine for a while, and then that is where I got my exposure into body-mind medicine. And that is what we practice at the Vibrant Health Center in Washington, in Trinidad, Barataria. Of course, if I tell you how long I started, maybe you would think I'm joking, but I started this about 30 years ago in Trinidad. And we're still going very strong and educating people in the field of natural medicine, mind medicine, and of course there's also spirit medicine. So we do practice. We do have a full house going in Barataria.
Thank you, Dr. Gaskin-Myers.
Well, I am originally a physicist, electronic engineer. Did engineering for about 30 years and then decided to switch to medicine. And the fact that I've been in electronics for so long affects my practice because I use instruments that normally are not even heard about, which I think probably people get around to, say, 15, 20 years from now in Trinidad. I'd relate it, if you would bear with me, Last year I was at a seminar by Dr. Schallenberger on the use of ozone. And we were talking, and he says to me, he says, the only thing that I have not been able to beat is Parkinson's. And I laughed. He says, what are you laughing at? I said, well, I have been able to beat Parkinson's. He says, what do you do? I said, well, I use the ozone, and I also use a Rife machine. I said, do you know what is a Rife machine? And he looked at me and says, don't insult me. Of course I know what is a Rife machine. He says, but I don't know which one to use. There's so many on the market. And I laughed at him, and he says, what are you laughing at? I said, well, as an electronic engineer, I don't have that problem. I could go into the meter and find out what's the best. So we had a long talk about which ones were the best and which one isn't. The point I'm making is that we have an idea about complementary medicine that is very, very limited. Very limited in what people think we can do and what we can't do. I hear people say, oh, acupuncture is for pain. I have had people with hormonal problems, and I can take any hormone, any one of the glands, and carry it up or down with acupuncture needles. I can raise the red blood cell count in 2 or 3 days with acupuncture needles. I can raise the white blood cell count with acupuncture needles. So when you look at that and you realize that in Western medicine they can't do that, then you begin to understand that the very idea of what we're doing is limited. You know, it doesn't infiltrate into the society. And I always think that that is a pity, that we can't do that. People come to me with lupus, I cure the lupus. I've done it many times. Other people come to me with lupus for 11 years.
Well, if I could ask, we're going to get into all that in a little while.
No, but I'm just pointing out something.
Yeah. We're kind of trying to go through a particular procedure, so if you hold your comments for a while,
okay,
while we get the full introductions, and then we go into the details of your practice.
Well, I'll tell you why I just did that intro. I did that intro to point out that the complementary medicine is way wider than is meeting the eye. And I think that some consideration should be given as to some of the types of treatment that they use. It's not just herbs. And even in herbs, you have different categories. You have homeopathics, and you have different levels of homeopathics.
But Dr. Gaskin-Myers, not trying to be rude at all.
No, I'm not being.
We're just trying to go through a particular process. But we appreciate your commentary.
I'm just pointing out something. You know, when I looked at this, I said, hey, this is a very limited document.
Well, that's why you're here.
Yeah. All right.
Right?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Dr. West Charles LeBlanc, if I can shorten your name a bit.
You could just go with Dr. LeBlanc. My husband will be happy, my father won't. I am a general practitioner. I graduated from Cuba as a medical doctor. That's where I started with my interest in integrative medicine using herbs and acupuncture. I'm also a member now of the Herbal Subcommittee with Ministry of Health, truly believing that we can create policy where this is concerned, excited about this process, and that's why I'm here, really. I do work in both aspects, East and West, and I do believe that they can be integrated. It doesn't have to be either or.
Thank you. Well, just to give an overview, that's exactly why we invited you and initiated this process, because we realized that this can be of benefit to Trinidad and Tobago, but there are many steps before we take it to the next level, if we are to be diligent, because we're talking about people's health and lives, so we have to be diligent as a parliament. I'll just ask a general opening question. This is a very diverse, as Dr. Gaskin-Myers says, and from the comment he made earlier, looking at the document, it may be limited, but we are quite open to all the information possible so that we can move forward from an empirical approach upon which policy can be built. And hopefully we have some sort of consensus moving forward. But just as an opening question, and feel free to jump in individually, because you're all representing different entities today. Because of the number of players that have emerged over the last couple of decades in Trinidad and Tobago, and because of the variety of backgrounds from which they come, what are your views on the level of oversight and regulation of the industry or of the sector as it presently exists, and what are the the advantages and disadvantages to that. I don't know who wants to go first. The question is really on oversight.
As a medical practitioner, I must say that I don't think we have enough regulation when it comes to the alternative or complementary medical world in Trinidad and Tobago. That being said, the medical fraternity, of which I'm a very proud member of, because of lack of understanding, dare I say, they don't accept it either, and it's just totally downplayed and disregarded, and that causes further rebellion. So it's about communication, understanding, and we have to regulate, because these complementary healthcare practitioners, not all are medical doctors, and we have to find a way to regulate them, because what we're dealing with, not because it's called herbal, not because it's called natural, it can't be dangerous. And that has to be understood, and it's understood by most of us who are really and truly registered practitioners of this field. And so we have to we're the stakeholders, and we have to acknowledge that we have to have policy, and it has to be regulated, and it's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid. So there's no doubt that we have to regulate it. But to blatantly shut it down, make it almost criminal, is going to cause more problems, because the world today is leaning towards that, and not just leaning, we are there. And so you don't want to have a problem where people have to hide or run and do this, and then there's problems. So we do need to be open about it, and we do have to have regulation.
Member Antoine.
Have any of you been consulted by the Ministry of Health regarding a possible legal framework for the regulation of traditional medicine or complementary alternative medicine? Have you all been contacted by them?
I am a member of the Herbal Subcommittee right now, where we are trying to draft the policy, which was initially being drafted by the previous Herbal Subcommittee, and so we're now trying to draft the policy regarding the legal aspects of using non-traditional medication, for want of a better word.
Is there any timeline for the completion of that?
We have not been given a timeline, but we are in the process, because once we have put forward our recommendations to the Food and Drug Committee, and they have to now tell us if they accept our recommendation or proposal for us to further continue the work to formulate the policy.
Thank you. Thank you. I was listening to both Dr. Lionel, Gaston Mears, and Dr. LeBlanc, and I wanted to ask really and truly, you spoke about Dr. Mears spoke about the complementary medicine as well as yourself. And I want to ask really and truly, what is natural medicine? Because you're saying that there are aspects of it can be dangerous. So what can be so dangerous about natural medicine that will allow the doctor, the medical fraternity to fight against the usage of natural medicine?
First, I'd like to say that herbal medicine is not as dangerous as Western medicine. Very rare you'd find anybody getting poisoned or having any serious side effects or anything like that. But you can give a person the wrong formula or something like that, especially when you begin to deal with intricate herbal formulas and things like that. So you want to be sure that when you, just as how they do in the States, you sit your board exam and you get things, and then you go and you sit your state exam in order for them to know that you have a certain level of competence and you're not going to go out there and do nonsense. I would like to make one comment. It's a little bit outside. I, having spent years in science, and my last job was calibrations engineer to Novant Pharmaceuticals in Miami for 10 years. That one of the things that appalls me about the whole of medicine in this town is that we don't have any labs checking anything, everything. Let me take a little time and give you one little story. A guy came to me, he had a high PSA, no cancer or anything like that, and he says, well, there's all kind of talk. I says, I have the ability to bring it down. Give me about 3 months. His PSA was about 90. So I said to him, I expect it to come down at the end of the first month by half. So we did that, and it came down to about 40. I says, the next one is going to reach about 30, 28. And it came down to that. The next month I said to him, all right, I expect it to be down about 13 to about 13. At the end of the thing, I wrote out the thing. I said, go to the labs and check it. He comes back, and he comes back with a reading on 96. And I said, that's impossible. You haven't been breaking the diet or anything. He says, no, I found everything. So I said, all right. So I sent him to 2 other labs. I said, I am paying for it. One lab came in at 13.9, and the other one came in at 13.8, which is within the tolerances. And I said, how many labs do you have in Trinidad where the readings are wrong consistently? Without those readings, without those calibrations, what you're doing in medical science is really a waste of time, because you're using facts that are not facts. I tell you from my experience in the States, every year you had to sit in front of the FDA.
Mayor, I appreciate your concerns, but I'm really asking about the natural medicine. I think that
I answered you. I said that it has to do with the competence of the person, and that a person could give a patient a wrong formula based on the fact that they're incompetent to diagnose it.
But in addition, I wonder here, Mr. Franco, but you know, there is a particular vitamin that is required by all human beings, and that's the B12. And I'm reading now where it is, even in natural medicine, there's a mixture of cyanide, which is a little bit, but still is an issue, and yet they're saying that it's natural. And
it's not quite natural. Right. You have 2 main types of vitamin B12. You have methylcobalamin and cyanocobalamin. Methylcobalamin can be processed by the body, providing that the stomach has a thing in it called intrinsic factor, which most people don't have. That is why when you're doing B12, when you want to give it to a patient and you want them to absorb it, you make it sublingual. Cyanocobalamin is a synthetic one. The molecules have a left-hand spin instead of a right-hand spin, if we had to get into that. It isn't easily digested by the body. Most things that you have on the market, they have cyanocobalamin. So technically speaking, they're useless. So you could pick up almost every set of vitamins that you have and just look at the list. And if you know what you're looking for, you know whether that vitamin is useless. Most of the vitamins that you buy in the shop, they're useless.
In the interest of managing time, I would like the other members to comment on the oversight and regulation industry, please, starting with Mr. Anyone who wants to take on, please.
Yes.
Mr. Hazelwood, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, the oversight is, when we look at the ancients or granny days, if you recall, she went to the bushes and got herbs, and these herbs, they really worked. And I found out after some time in my investigation that there was a spiritual aspect. In other words, the mind, the spirit, the energy in the body was transferred. It was a language that was communicated between the herb and the individual. And I remembered, if I may just put this one in, I had a bone that was stuck in my throat. And that was due to, was supposed to have had surgery. And I went to Granny, and she said, she just stroked the throat 3 times, and she said, swallow. I don't know where the bone went up now. And of course, with childhood diseases, she was the doctor, more or less, in the district. So you find that a lot of these things, a lot of herbs, like when I ask the older people what these herbs represent, how do you know they're medicinal? And they told me, look at how the herb is shaped, smell the herb and everything. So there's a connection that we are really missing. And in Ayurvedic medicine, they said, which is about over 10,000 years old, it is said that every leaf in the face of this earth is has a medicinal purpose. And when you look at the human body, like today people can't sleep and they take in melatonin and other drugs to make them sleep, to make them happy, to give them that happy mood. You find that the pineal gland, which is neglected a lot, that produces its own melatonin, you see. So all we have to do is to try to develop the pineal gland. And we do have natural ways and medicines to do that. And we have herbs that would actually activate the
Dr. Israel, can I interrupt you?
Yes, sir.
I know everyone sitting there has particular areas of expertise and experiences in their practice. But we really want to follow a particular format to get information upon which we can build a framework. Because if everyone tells us about their practice itself, I don't think we're going to get very far. And I'm not being rude in any way. Right? We just have to manage it in a particular way to get information which we can use. And it's unfair to you, quite frankly, because the time is too limited for all your vast expertise. But if everyone goes through medical and CAM processes, we're not going to get as productive a session. So we want to know what your thoughts are on regulation and oversight. Should this be a self-regulated sector like the medical board or the association? Should it be there be state oversight? I want to get the information on regulation at this point. All right?
Yes.
And I hope I'm not being rude by what I've just said.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Well, I think it should be legalized because we have too many fly-by-night and wash-your-foot coming in without the necessary qualifications. I think it should be legalized. People should produce proper documentation, certification, and of course, we need more training.
Franco.
Right. There are many difficulties in trying to have oversight on, we'll start with the practitioners, because we have practitioners and we have products, so it's two different areas, right? So in the field of practitioners, it is difficult because we have a wide range or a diverse range of practitioners doing various things. So you might have 10 herbalists in Trinidad, 2 might be qualified, different qualifications, others might be self-made, taught at home, right? So it's
decides on what qualifications should be accepted. That's what we want to get at, obviously. Because everyone is going to say, I train myself, I'm trained X and Y. This is a very extremely varied field. And what we're talking about is regulation and oversight and standardization of, as Dr. Gaskin-Meyer says, testing, equipment, research, because that's another large part of it. How do we standardize such a complex and varied industry?
Yeah, so there is a problem with the practitioners being so varied and diverse. So,
I want to welcome Member West. Thank you for joining us. Member Antoine.
The Medical Board Act, Chapter 2950, if a person claims to be a medical doctor and is not registered with the medical board, the doctor can be prosecuted by law. However, if a person does not claim to be a medical doctor, but instead claims to sell products that cure or prevent diseases, then the medical board has no jurisdiction over such an individual. Do you believe that practitioners and merchants involved in traditional medicine should be regulated via a voluntary regulation, that is self-regulatory system, or should the system be regulated by law? And do you believe that regulations or laws are needed to promote proper practices within the natural medicine industry and to safeguard members of the public from unscrupulous practices?
Let me start with Mr. Marcus on that.
Thank you. Regulation is a heavy topic and something that, of course, governments, this is why we're in the process we're in, to select committees towards governments. A country through its government cannot do anything at once. There are international guidelines, there are international regulations that guide, for lack of better words, nearly everything. And whatever is not regulated yet in terms of products, foodstuffs, whatever it is, regulations are coming. Those in the government can attest to that. When it comes to herbal medicines, first of all, to answer one of your questions, yes, there needs to be regulation. Otherwise, we're not looking at the public health of our citizens. You can't have someone, which we've seen on TV, I know I can't call names, but we've even seen on TV some practitioners offering you to iron out your hair to fix things. And having discussed this case in particular with our drug inspectorate and certain members of our Ministry of Health, they explained to me that they could not, because of the regulation and the laws that exist presently, go after persons like this just because of what you just said, because they're not claiming to be medical doctors, so they're not breaking the law. So yes, to answer your question, we do need laws in place, and to answer a second question simultaneously, it needs to be government regulated. Right? It needs to take the advice of committees, of associations, of complementary medicine practitioners heavily. It needs to take all the advice from those stakeholders heavily. But in the end, the government, just like what we're doing, as I say, with my little experience now with the cannabis bills in Antigua, we're taking in stakeholders. I've led joint select committee hearings across there, and we're taking the advice of them and then changing the bills and changing the regulations that the expert and the drafters work towards drafting. It is very important that we take into consideration the international guidelines. I've just actually saw that there is a World Health Organization guidelines for alternative medical medicines, alternative herbal supplements. There are guidelines for the production of herbal supplements and all these things. And we need, especially as a third world country, to adhere to and keep in line with international regulations so that we won't be able to be blacklisted and then sanctioned in any way. Right? For those who don't understand, the government understands, but sanctions mean the United Nations could put towards us things like they could stop our trade in foods and they could stop our tourism and such and such. And small islands depend heavily on those things. Carnival is a big input for resources. So we try to stay away from that by keeping in compliance with international regulations, and those things are clearly laid out in different sectors, WHO sectors, INCB sectors, International Narcotics Control Board, and so forth. So once we are putting together policy, yes, just to summarize, it needs to be under the advice of the complementary medical personnel and associations, and the government needs to set up their legal drafters to start drawing framework towards it in line with international regulations. Thank you.
It is a scary thing. And given the reality of social media, where anybody could put a video on social media, as the case may be, and where people are fearful as to how, they recover from illnesses, what would you all advise in terms of getting self-regulatory system for people who have access to social media, people who have access to people who deal with people's fear, in terms of becoming healthy in the absence of a system regulated by the government, regulated by law?
Let me just add one corollary to that question. How much is the unregulated paradigm of this hurting your practices? Because they are what are described as the legitimate people, qualified, and then there are the others. And the others, as Member Anton has said, are well versed in putting up videos on social media and promoting themselves as legitimate. And very often the entire sector is engulfed in that doubt by the public.
I just want to make a short comment. The drug companies, having worked for a drug company a long time, they travel the world. They go to Africa, they go to all the shamans and them, and they take up the substances they use, they carry it back, and they process it. I am really making a plea, like Mr. Hazelwood was saying, that you have people who have the ability to, for want of a better word, to see inside the plant and tell you what the plant is good for. And one of the things that I don't think that we should do is that we should regulate the thing in such a way and not leave a space for those people. Because I have a healthy respect for quite a few of them. And I have spent years learning the technical aspects. The Chinese medicine is extremely advanced and extremely technical. You get everything from the molecular shape of the herb and everything. So all I'm saying is that inside this, we have to find a way to to help the traditional
research and development.
Huh?
Research and development.
Yes, to pull them in and take that talent and use it. One little short story. I was reading a book on cosmic thing, and the guy.
Another short story.
Yes, he went down. I'm a storyteller. He went down to Ecuador, and he was working with the shaman. And they're going through the forest, and he says, "Pick some of that, pick some of that, pick some of that." And the guy says to him, he was out at Caltech. He says, "You must have a phenomenal knowledge of plants to be able to do that." And he looked at him, he says, "I don't have any knowledge of plants." He said, "Well, how do you do that?" He says, "I talk to the plants, and they talk back to me." He says, "And I make the formula, and it works." You know? So he says, "Well, how do you talk to the plants?" He said, "I talk to the snakes." He said, "The snakes?" He says, "The guy going mad." He says, a week later, the guy puts out some rugs, and on the rugs, he has a double helix. So he says to the guy, "You have the DNA there." The DNA, he says, "DNA?" He says, "That's the snakes in the plant. I talk to that." So he's left with trying to figure out how this guy has the ability to communicate with the DNA in the plant. And he knew from the drawing, he says, that's the DNA. He could also draw the actual thing. So once we cross, we have a tendency in the third world to throw out all the things that we know that worked because we think that we are going modern. In actual fact, what the modern people do is they come to the people who have that ability, tap them, and then go and make a drug.
Don't throw out research and development. Dr. LeBlanc. So, state-regulated or self-regulating entity, and how do we standardize? And are you advocates of some sort of licensing regime?
I was actually thinking about it, and I'm really of the view that it needs to be both. Whereas, in my view, we have self-regulation in terms of knowing the certified schools that the alternative practitioners have come from. And so you have a board of natural medicine or a board of alternative medicine, for want of a better, that's just a thought. But because I'm a medical doctor, I think that there should be a medical liaison with the Medical Board of Trinidad and Tobago. Member Noalo, you asked us about the complementary medicine, and I don't think you were answered. So complementary medicine is a very broad term, and the reason I'm saying this is because we have traditional medicine, so we have what our ancestors have, and WHO has recognized that, and then we have the alternative or the complementary aspect of it, which includes herbal medicine, which is not necessarily only traditional because it includes Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Western herbal medicine, and then you have the non-herbal alternative world, which is acupuncture, acupressure, cupping, moxibustion, ozone, vibrational, and I could go on. Homeopathic medicine as well. And so we have to have government regulation, we have to have, state regulation, and we have to have self-regulation about that. Where this is concerned, but you will never be able to fully regulate traditional herbal medicine. So that is your granny going into the backyard, you won't regulate that. But somebody saying, my grandmother taught me this, and therefore I'm going to set up shop and do this, that has to be regulated.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because to me one of the most pressing issues is that the Food and Drug Act is not applicable to herbal products.
Correct.
And would you endorse then, and it's a pressing issue in Trinidad and Tobago because people are advertising health benefits.
Correct.
And people are neglecting what may be interventions that can save their lives. In some instances, people have died because they have went to the side of these advertisements and say, well, forget this, and I'm taking on this. And there's no accountability or repercussion for the persons who have advertised and sold them these products. So with that said, would you endorse having herbal products that are that local manufacturers are proffering to promote particular benefits be assessed by the Ministry of Health?
Correct.
Because of the implications for life and death in these circumstances before they are sold to customers at some level. And anyone can answer that, because these are life and death situations now and are eminent issues.
This is why the Food and Drug Committee has created the Herbal Subcommittee, because there is a need for regulation of these products. But these products cannot be determined to be pharmaceutical or drugs. So the minute somebody says this will heal or this will cure, you have entered the pharmaceutical world and you will have to follow the Food and Drug Act because you are now claiming to be a pharmaceutical. If you say support, then you are not a drug because the herbal world does not go through the phase 4 trials for drugs. But we still have a way to regulate you because we know, for example, cinnamon. We know what's in it. We know the pharmacology of cinnamon and what needs to be done. It needs to be regulated. We need to test for heavy metals. We need to test for the pathogens such as microbiological pathogens so as to prevent a public health hazard. When somebody says, I'm going to cure, I'm going to treat, forget medicine and do that, they have now crossed the border. They have gone into the border, in my humble opinion, of pharmaceuticals. So the herbal subcommittee is there, and I'm present on it, where we are now looking at the herbal products that come in, and based on the information on what they contain and what they claim to be doing, the actions, because of our knowledge and our research, because we would have to do research, then that can be regulated as if it's deemed safe or not for use by the public. And who can prescribe it? So is it over the counter or by a registered or certified natural health practitioner or a medical doctor?
Mr. Franco and then Dr. Hazelwood, please.
You made a comment just a little while ago about people negating to go towards the orthodox modern medicine and to use natural traditional medicine, and they succumb to their illness. But that happens when people take pharmaceutical medicines, right? Over 100,000 people die in the United States every day from their pharmaceutical medicines, not while taking them and succumb to the illness, but directly because of their pharmaceutical medicines. That's an average of 290 persons die every day from pharmaceutical drugs. Right? There are less than a handful of deaths in the United States per year from natural medicines. Right? So they're very, very safe. So over-regulation is not necessary.
When you say they are very, very safe, don't you need to qualify that?
Natural medicines have been shown to be very, very safe from the historical data.
From your perspective, and there are different practitioners in Trinidad and Tobago, so for you to make a blanket statement that they are very safe, it suggests that all purveyors of natural medicine are holding to the standards that you may hold yourself to, and that may not necessarily be the case. That's not a statement that I think we should just take lightly.
So that's a good point, right? And in Trinidad, we do have a problem, right? And you asked a question earlier, and how does it affect us because of the non-regulation of these practitioners and what they can and cannot say and broadcast on the media? And certainly it has a negative impact on our whole industry, right? And it would be nice if our industry could be seen by the wider public as legitimate and beneficial, right? And also, if we could have government support, if we could have integration, right, within the modern medical system, and we can have insurance companies helping their clients to pay for these type of treatments as well. This is happening in many developed countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, in Europe, right? So it would be nice to have some regulation, but in Trinidad we have issues in getting there. And we have to work that out. It's going to take some work.
Yes. I agree with Mr. Franco up to a point, because we are using herbal medicine every day. Turmeric in the curry, all the herbs and the shadow benny and all this kind of thing. We're using it on a daily basis. But the insurance, right? What I think we need here is education. We need to organize ourselves as a body and have proper education and know where we are going from here, because right now everything seems to be disjointed, in parts. This one saying this, that one saying that, the insurance company and everything else. So we have to organize ourselves. And then, of course, educate people, educate the doctors, educate the insurance companies, let them know the value and what they are actually missing and what they are actually, how they can help people. Because I am, as a graduate of Bastia University, I can go in 30-something states in the United States and practice, and the insurance company will pay. So what we need to do is to have like you have books, educate people.
That's because you're certified.
Books, you know. And
you are certified by a credible institution.
Yes, we have to be. And then, of course, I think this is where the legislation and whatnot, the government can help.
Member Masters, intervention. Yes, sorry.
Again, apologies for being late, and I hope I'm not repeating a question that was asked before. But that leads me to a question that I have in mind. What, if any, action is being taken by the traditional sector to align themselves with the more recognized medical sector so that we can get to a place where the two groups are working together to provide the best treatment for whatever ailment, so that there is mutual respect? One will say that perhaps my approach is not going to work, so we should try something alternative, and vice versa. Is that happening at all?
In a few cases, I have doctors who work with me. They would ring me up and say, hey, you know, I have somebody here with gallstones and we can't operate on them. Can you do something? Sure, send them, I'll melt it. You know?
What can we do to make that a more significant part of how we operate?
That's communication. That has to do with communication.
It's just communication. Is it establishing a kind of framework for it to operate more effectively? Of course, communication is just depending on the will and fancies of people and their will. But if we have a framework, which is part of why we're here today, coming to some consensus on a framework and a policy document moving forward that we can develop and evolve the collaborative, which I'm thinking, Member Western thinking, in a formalized way so that all can contribute to the well-being of the country at large.
We have to get, for example, you asked how organized we are. So Mr. Franco has an organization that he has formed a couple of years back. But as he said, not many of us are part of that organization. So we have to establish, as members of the complementary
Can I ask why you're not part of it?
Because I didn't get his memo. And, you know, it has to be that we have recognized institutions from which you graduate from and for certification. And also, the medical board and the medical fraternity is going to take a while for them to, despite education and communication, the ideal would be that they'll be happy to communicate and understand that it's not either or and we can help. But it's going to take a while for them to accept that communication. And I'm a doctor, and I could tell you it took a while for my colleagues to accept, you know, me as what I do in terms of bringing the two together. So the framework has to be the certified institutions and universities for natural medicine. And then once we have that and we know who we're registering, also liaise with the medical board and say, we're not going to be doctors, but we can help. And how can we communicate? So that it is about the health of Trinidad and Tobago, and the medical board can communicate with the dare I say, the board of natural medicine. You know, in the States, for example, there's the American Herbal Society or American Herbal Guild. So if you are a certified herbalist, you have to put your papers forward and you have to be approved, and then you're recognized. There's the Acupuncturist Guild. So, you know, these things exist in the first world, and so we can create that framework, and we do need to create that framework. It's not going to happen overnight. And the medical fraternity does also have to, they are trying to come on board, and what doctors think they're doing, and I mean, I love my colleagues dearly, is by just prescribing black cohosh or prescribing evening primrose or prescribing whatever they hear is the latest fad as being holistic. And there's more to holistic medicine and complementary medicine than that. And that is what we have to communicate and explain to them. So I don't just sit down and say, oh, you have this, let me just give you that. That's not how it works. So we have to educate them, dare I say educate them, and communicate and be willing to hear from them and understand that both sides have side effects. Both sides, but yes, we have less side effects in the complementary world. And we can do that framework, communicate, and truly, if we care about the health of Trinidad and Tobago, we can make that happen.
Member Hussein.
Thank you, Chair. You know, Doctor, you're saying that you're answering straight into my question here. And it is, you know, there's this feeling there that there's a natural distrust between the fraternities that you're speaking about. And it extends now to the population. Because you feel as though when you go to a medical doctor, I'm not stating this as fact, okay? It's in fact a question. You feel that the symptoms are being treated as opposed to the problem. And therefore, when you go to a herbalist, when you go to source holistic treatment, whether it's cupping, acupuncture, or what other means there are available, that the problem is going to be addressed because the herbalist, the natural medicine practitioner is looking to enhance your well-being of life and to extend your life, whereas on the other end, it's a matter of, well, you know, you have to pay for my education, you know. And I'm saying it as you say your head on the ground there, I'm being very real here. So, you know, is it because of this natural distrust that that hinders the working together? Because I believe that a complementary technique going forward is necessary for the population. But I can't say. You have to say as a medical doctor and probably the practitioners that are present here.
The medical, I mean, I'm a doctor. I studied in Cuba. My medical training was completely different to some of the training that I've heard about. As a physician in Cuba, the first thing you learned was what was the definition of health, which was the balance of body, mind, and soul. Some practitioners may not practice that in the Western world. I don't think it's it's due to their lack of training of it, but I do hear that, you know, you have to pay for my degree. There's distrust of Western medicine. There's a distrust of the doctors have a distrust of the herbal world because it's so extensive. They don't know about it. And so they rather say, and I've had doctors who say, this will kill you. That will kill you. They don't understand the dosing. They don't understand that there is a science behind it. So there has to be a lot of talking, a lot of education, but we can start the process. And as stakeholders, they have the right to come and say, I don't want this because, and then we as the certified ones can also say, but look at how this works. So that we have to communicate. We can't communicate between the patients anymore because I have patients who will go to the specialist and they say, for example, I have this and my herbalist gave me that. I want to hear nothing about the herbs. The herbs will kill you. Whereas it's not, it doesn't have to be like that. And you're putting the individual now is in a quandary. And they have to now make a decision over their health when we are both professionals who are supposed to guide this patient along that road to optimal health.
But you have to also have a repository or a list of alternative and complementary practitioners that you trust and you have faith in that is above board. I want to bring Mr. Ramkisoon into this because very often we think of cannabis in one light, and cannabis has quite varied applications from my cursory interrogation of it, and that doesn't mean smoking.
Just before I touch on the cannabis issue, just a few points that were brought up, if I can. Again, regulation is necessary, and taking in with consultation from alternative medicine practitioners. As we have heard, these persons already have a board, an association in place. One of the biggest points that was brought up just now was making sure that the persons that are able to practice in the future with legislation would have to come from accredited institutions, and therefore their certifications and such would be accredited, because there are a lot of traditional complementary medicine is very wide. There are things ranging from masseuses go right up. And when it comes to the actual supplements, that is a bigger part. Regulating, in my opinion, regulating our complementary medicinal practitioners is the easy part. Setting up an alternative board, not self-regulated, they will have to report to cabinet and so forth, and all these things, and abide by certain rules. It's more the products, as Mr. Franco correctly pointed out. A number of products are allowed in our pharmacies as herbal supplements, as I was discussing this morning also with our herbalist. And there's a number of products that are not. One of the reasons that a lot of products are not allowed is because they are not able to be standardized. Right, they're compounded mixtures. Some are even single plant products. But because of the lack of the ability to standardize and therefore not elicit proper dosing mechanisms, these products would not end up in pharmacies. Bringing that back to the cannabis issue, cannabis as a plant itself, which is not prescribed in most places, it's recommended by physicians. The reason for such, as we've discovered, is just as I said. You cannot standardize really a plant until you put it in capsules and all that stuff. You can, but in the format that cannabis is normally dispensed under, it's not usually in the format of capsules and so forth. There is, but it's usually flowers. It's not one cannabis or one marijuana. It's thousands of strains that exist, and you find that each one with a different cannabinoid profile, meaning the varied ratio of the THCs, CBDs, and all these things within it, produce different therapeutic effects. So it is, and because it's been illegal for so long, the lack of the availability to study it properly. There is a lot of studies. I've put forward a written submission to you guys. I hope everyone here had gotten it. But I had followed that, especially with some 4 main classes of non-communicable diseases, how cannabis would work in treatment and in support of. And I followed it with more pages of references than the actual write-up. And this was because one of the biggest questions posed to me by the medical fraternity, by persons within your positions, is there the research to support this? One of the things I would like you to look at, if you access that document, hopefully through you guys, is that most of the research that I produced was stuff that was done between 99 till present. It was not taking into account a lot of the older research, because this is why persons do research. Everything, we learn more and more every day. We learn that different things can affect persons different ways. And we still don't know half of the stuff that happens within our own bodies, so we're constantly learning. In saying so, we could not, just for example, in Antigua, allow, and it was one of the main questions raised by the pharmaceutical board and the medical fraternity, we could not put cannabis into the pharmacies in its raw form. So we've decided that we've labeled and we've created a description of prescribable and non-prescribable cannabis, and prescribable cannabis will end up being, and I think this can apply to all the herbal supplements and the herbal medications that we're talking about now that are presently not allowed for various reasons. Prescribable meaning that it can be put into a standardized format and therefore prescribed by the medical practitioners, as are allowed in Pharmacy Act and Medical Practitioners Act and everything we have in Trinidad to go along with those things. Outside of this, the complementary medicine persons, in this regard for herbal medicine, when they form their association, they should be able to recommend, again, internationally complementary medicine practitioners are not allowed to prescribe traditional medicines. So they can recommend their herbal supplements, to which they, again, as they have all produced for you, has much value. But some persons will be better than others, just as the case with medical doctors. And there needs to be some level of oversight and a penalty system in place to ensure responsible dispensing. You don't want to go to a practitioner who says, okay, I'm qualified, I'm signed up by the board, and I have a certain formulation, and then that formulation damages the person. That person needs to be held accountable. So those things and those measures need to be taken into account when you're drafting the regulations towards complementary medicine on the whole. Cannabis in its own form is a little bit different. So just to give you a quick example of what we've done in Antigua and what the system follows internationally so far, be it Canada, the US, and so forth. They've taken cannabis, or not put cannabis into the pharmacies. they've allowed specific cannabis dispensaries because of the noxious smell, because of a number of factors. And again, mostly because it's non-prescribable. The international community, the INCB, recommends that you issue a recommendation as opposed to a prescription. We've gone with that direction. And we're only allowing medical practitioners in Antigua to prescribe. And we're allowing medical practitioners, again, to recommend. Once they recommend, and it's cannabis that you're looking at, there would be a special dispensary you would go to that would carry the products, and there would be a certified special dispenser. Once that person is certified by an authority that is set up within the government, so again, it's all government regulated, it's not self-regulated. Self-regulation should always be guided by the authority. The authority should always be a government body, right, so that we don't allow things to go anyway out of line.
All right, I want to push us a bit deeper into the abyss now. Now, the official, please, if it can be quick. Put on your mic, please.
Terms like standardized, right? We use it loosely. I, having walked in both fields, will just make a point. We were making a skin patch to carry estrogen into women who had menopause. The companies that we were using closed down. So we sent and we ordered 4 or 5 samples from 4 or 5 different companies, all standardized, and we put it into the patches, and none worked. And what we had to do was to go through something like about 35 companies until we found one that worked empirically, and we didn't know why it worked over the others. So we use terms loosely. Having been in trials where they say you put in trials into drugs onto the market, and what are the trials that are done, and what are the mathematics and things like that, I could tell you that that is not as scientific as we think it is. And I spent 12 years in that business, right at the top. And so I think that as a third world country, we have to be very careful when somebody comes along and says standardize or things, that it has a meaning, because you're dealing with molecular theory and things like that, which is in its infancy. So whenever we use something, don't be too sure that you're saying something and that it means what it says, because experience has proven that to me over and over and over. The other thing about it is that you say, well, why it is that more people are going to alternative medicine. It's very simple. A lot of the drugs that they have on the market have a tremendous amount of side effects. And so what they do is they come in. I have people all the time, they come in and they say, hey, I don't want to take all this stuff. Do you have something that could replace it? And so you also have another problem. And the problem is sometimes that the practice that we're doing does not keep abreast with the discoveries that we have. I have somebody come to me and say, hey, I have a swollen heart, and the doctor says there's nothing they could do about it. They'll give me some medicine. And I say, oh, but that is very easy to get rid of. If you use these supplements, it will take about 2 or 3 months, and the heart will go back to its normal size, and the valves that are faulty, 90% of the time they start back working. That is in the Western medicine. And you have doctors saying that it can't be done. So you have a whole contraindication going on. And when you look at it, one of the reasons why people come because they come to me all the time and they say, look, I have taken this and I have no energy and I can't do this and I can't do that, And so you start treating them. You start treating them and they see results that they couldn't get from the Western medicine. And then, of course, they go and tell all their friends. And then you have all their friends coming in. I always make a claim I've been doing that in my little TV show, and radio show, that 90% of the medicines that we dispense in this country is thrown down the drain.
We have 25 minutes. I want to get through 2 objectives. The overarching objective is the use of CAMs in non-communicable diseases. Like your comments on that. And I also want to get to the role that tertiary institutions in Trinidad and Tobago should be playing in this process. Right? So let's start with the anyone who wants to jump in the non-communicable disease, the diabetes, the cancers, etc. Because I think we've laid a pretty strong framework from everyone's perspective on where this should go, where it is now. So let's be a bit more pointed now in terms of what exists now from your research, knowledge, or practice on in the non-communicable disease sphere in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me start with the lady with the most common cosmopolitan name I've ever seen in my life, which I just occurred to me. The Asante Indira Van West Charles LeBlanc is quite cosmopolitan.
African, Indian, Dutch, and
Everything.
English, right? And French. Yes, I do use CAM for non-communicable chronic diseases. I tend to do it more complementary. It does depend on the grade of the non-communicable disease. So hypertension, for example, it depends on which stage it's at, that you can see a difference doing the holistic alone or both, bringing them complementary. It should be noted that every single lifestyle disease starts off, the step one of treatment is lifestyle modification, which is nutrition and exercise. And then you can implement the CAM with that, and then, but I monitor my patients, and I'm able to monitor them because I'm a medical practitioner. This is where we need the communication to see, are you really benefiting from this lifestyle, or do we need to add and be more complementary and bring in pharmaceuticals?
Well, it's interesting you say nutrition and lifestyle, because somewhat my research, lifestyle is CAM in a lot of ways.
Exactly. So I truly believe that we do use CAM for chronic non-communicable diseases, and it works. I am a member, I'm the vice chair of the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society. I do not advocate to patients not to follow their oncologist and to abandon traditional oncology for the hope of herbs healing and curing the cancer. I do advocate for using both. And Chinese medicine, we have the branch where we do both. So we do the acupuncture and the herbs along with the chemo and radiation, and the patient will survive. Tertiary institutions, they need to do more. They need to bring it into their medical curriculum so that the medical practitioners are at least aware of the existence of this branch of medicine. And
my comment about tertiary education was more about along the line of research. Mm-hmm. Many of the stakeholders before us have spoken about their experiences in international experiences in its certification and qualification. And I don't get a lot of, for lack of a better term, noise in Trinidad and Tobago about research being done or championing of.
Dr. Compton Seafort is a major force with research and development. We need more noise, and I don't know how we're going to get more noise, because research and development needs funding. So
He's a member of which institution?
Dr. Seafort used to be with UE, but I don't think he's there anymore. I think he's actually retired now, but he was heavy into, dare I say, he was instrumental in bringing to the forefront the use of soursop for breast cancer. So he is doing a lot of research at that time. So we do need more research and development in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think small baby steps where that is concerned will help, because they're very simple things that can be done, but we do need to implement
Dr. Gaspin. Sorry, Minister, Member Sinanan.
Yeah. Welcome again to the panel. What percentage of your clients, you would say, are clients who would be visiting you at probably the end of a stage of an illness? Meaning, your client as a last resort, because you hear a lot of people say, okay, I'm going at the herbalist, visiting this practitioner, but it is as almost a last resort, because they went to the traditional doctors and they would then resort to you. Yeah. What percentage of your clients?
70%.
70%. Mm-hmm. So are you saying that as a population, we have not accepted the fact that herbal medicine is really the first option?
For some people, yes, and for some people, no. Some people, they might be in insurance, and the insurance demands that they go to the Western doctor, and they reach a point where they don't want to do that anymore, and they go to the alternative doctor. But I wanted to make a point. You mentioned diabetes. We know that diabetes the big cause of that is the use of hydrogenated oil, right? When you say that you have a thing, one of the things that surprises me is that nobody in any of the doctrines would get up and say, let us petition the government not to bring in hydrogenated oil. We could lick the diabetes problem in 10 years. You know, that's the main cause of it. So you find that you have a disconnect between what is causing sickness and what we regard as health. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff going on with glyphosate. And there are countries that are banning it. I just read a report where Macron is saying that in the next year and a half, they're going to do away with glyphosate because of the problems that it's causing. We don't have those kind of discussions here. It's like we just bumble along, you know. We have our chicken, and the chicken is loaded with steroids and all kinds of things because that is what everybody else is doing. And nobody says, so listen, let's stop that. We're a small country. It's very easy to stop that and bring back health. And if you have to raise the pound of the chicken by 10 or 15, 20 cents, do that, and then we'd have healthy chickens. And you could go through a whole lot of stuff, right? You have sprays like 2,4-D, which alters the sexual orientation of anything that it touches, including men and women. And we have all these things, you know. I have my show and I'm always talking about them, but nobody takes me on. I was pointing out the other day that the national flour mills have a hydrogenator. And I says, why would you hydrogenate the oil? Bring it in and use it. And I got a phone call from the plant saying, we don't hydrogenate it anymore because we had a fire. So what we do now is we bring it in from outside. It is interesting to note that President Trump, at the end of June, passed a law that any food that is manufactured in the United States to sell must not contain hydrogenated oil. And there was a little piece mentioned in some of the more obscure things, but it wasn't out on the front page. Mayor Bloomberg, when he took over New York, the first thing that he did, he said, I cannot ban hydrogenated oil from everybody, but I could ban it from the restaurants. So he went and he banned it. He had the clout and the money to do that. So we're looking at health in a very narrow way. Most of the times, the problems that we're having starts with what we eat, what we spray on the products. Long ago, you had people used to go into the markets and patrol and check the amount of spray on the things. Nobody does that anymore. So if I'm saying that if we're looking at this thing and we're looking at alternative, you have to look at alternative in terms of not sickness, but how do we keep the health of the country? That's really the point I'm making. And we have a lot of things that we're doing which is making us sick.
Member Jennings, go ahead, please.
Stories, because you have a lot of stories to tell. I like to listen to stories. And in one of the stories you said that you paid to do a testing where the return was much lower, was much higher. But what I want to know is what happened afterwards to that particular patient? Because
we took the readings what was lower, what was I expected, and we continued treating him. At the end of the next month, his PSA had gone down to 1 point something. You know, but that's a regular thing. I'm not talking about something that happens once in a while. It's a regular story. You'd get one ultrasound, and the ultrasound would say this person has cysts, and you go to another ultrasound, and the ultrasound say nothing's wrong.
And then I want to piggyback on my colleague's question, because I am not satisfied with the answer. I think we want to get an understanding of the quantum of patients that you would have treated and the ultimate result. The survival rate, thank you.
You cannot do that. You can't come and say the survival rate. You know, it's not. You're not dealing with you know, a thing that you're going to break, and you could imagine.
Well, maybe survival rate is not the correct word, but what I want to know is the results of some of the patients, like how many patients you would have treated over a period of time.
My office is always full.
Yes, using your
My
approach.
office is always full, and it's always full because people get results.
Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Hazelwood hasn't been contributing in a while about the issue of non-communicable diseases and your practice.
Yes. I think, again, we go back to if we don't get the right education, I'm just looking at a book here. We have 2 books that you can get information from, masterpieces. That is the one by Bastier, which is, and of course the Encyclopedia for, Natural Medicine and British Pharmacopoeia. Now, researchers were already done. All what we're doing here now is just beating around the bushes, really. All the herbs that you find in the market, in the world today.
Well, I disagree with that we're here beating around the bushes. Let me put it on the record.
No.
We're not here beating around the bushes.
I'm sorry about that statement. But what I mean by that is we can go, up and down until we get the facts, is what I mean, you see? The scientific facts. And the scientific facts were already there. All we have to do is to get into understanding that many of these herbs or alternative medicine, they have proven themselves as good, and people have attested, because you have a lot of, as I said, so much information out there, so many people who are totally satisfied. Like Norman Cousins, I think that is one that you should probably look up. Norman Cousins, he cured himself from incurable disease by laughter. You have meditation now. You have all these are medicines. You have relaxation. You have self-awareness. So what?
Dr. Iswood, if I can, we're not doubting the potential of this in any way, So I understand that you're advocating on behalf of the camps. We are here because we know of the potential and the success rate. So there's no need to try to convince us about the power of this. What we're trying to do is ascertain what is the way forward in Trinidad and Tobago. We're not doubting this. Nobody should think that we're doubting this. We are here because we want to hear from you, the stakeholders, about one, and the anecdotes are great, but what is the way forward where this is concerned?
Yeah, the way forward is education, and to get the public, the people to understand, also the government to understand too that the approach, the natural approach, the herbal approach, can save a lot of money, the country a lot of money. Once we educate people and we get people to testify, we can have an assessment island-wide and how many people have been, and then of course we can give a better record of progress. But just to say, well, how many people have been getting results, I can say in my practice, I can say 90%, but I don't see them all the time. You see, sometimes they probably go to other places. Dr. Myers was just telling me that he has a lot of my
but if they're getting better, you're not going to see them, huh? If they're getting better, you're not going to see them. Remember who said?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question and come back to a statement that you made very early, Dr. Myers. And first of all, I asked, during the a public hearing convened on June the 13th, 2018, a lecturer in pharmacy, University of the West Indies, submitted that alternative medicine has an 83% effective rate, while traditional medicines such as antibiotics has an 87% effective rate in the treatment of non-communicable diseases. So the question really is, how do you measure or gauge the effectiveness of your treatment as it concerns whether it's hypertension, diabetes, cancer, etc.? How do you measure it? Because at the end of the day, for us to move forward, there must be credibility. And that's what we're trying to establish. We're not trying to shoot down anyone. We're trying to establish how do we measure it so that there can be a convening of ideas to come about and say, look, we need to have both traditional and non-traditional medicine coming together to go forward. So that's what I'm asking really and truly.
I could answer that by saying, if you take cancer and the cancer patients that come to me, most of the time when cancer patients come to me, they're in stage 4, right? So it means I have to try and pull them out of stage 4. A lot of the diseases that come, the more serious diseases, they come after they've been to the Western practitioner. That's what happens. As I said, people come to me with a big bag of pills and they say, it is not making me better. It's making me feel sick. What can we do? I am then caught with having to say, well, okay, this is what we do. So that it's very difficult to put by and large, I have a good success rate to treating my patients. I have that because I always get recommendations. People come into my place and they say, oh, this guy down the road here, he had a bad back, he came up here, he couldn't walk, and he went out. Because the way how we treat that kind of thing is totally different from Western medicine. So I would say on that basis, we have much more of a success than Western medicine. We do hands-on treatment. That is different from most doctors unless they're probably...
Without being insulting in any way, I think the member is asking, how do you quantify that?
Well, I'm trying to explain how you get
Are you
around.
saying good and one, and maybe I'm not understanding your methodology, and that's what it is.
Well, the methodology is that when you're dealing with people, you say, you have to take into consideration what you're doing, the stage that it is in. If you say, well, was it success with cancer? I'd say very bad. Very bad, because I'm always dealing with stage 4 patients, and I'm also dealing with a lot of non-compliant stage 4 patients, right? So I have to explain that to say why it's bad. If I had stage 2 or stage 3, I could do pretty good. I'd probably do better than that chemotherapy and radiation. But that is that so that you're caught in a question that has so many open-ended differences. That
Not as straightforward as that.
Yes, you have to try.
Dr. LeBlanc, and then Mr. Franco and Mr. Ramkisoon, please.
I think this is where the communication between the medical practitioners and the complementary practitioners is needed. Because then if you're treating hypertension, if you're treating diabetes, then the proof in the pudding, the quantitative effects, results are seen with the medical practitioner who you communicate with doing the follow-up. We have the blood sugar diaries, we have the HbA1c levels, we have the blood pressure diaries, we have the end organ disease, so we can do the lab tests. We do have to use, and they are in the process of making sure the labs are standardized, because we have to have labs that give proper results. As a medical practitioner, I have seen labs giving me erroneous results. That is what, but you do have to quantify it. So if I have a stage 2 cancer, then after treatment with both chemo, radiation, and Dr. Myers or Dr. Myers alone, the oncologist has to follow up. So there's the scanning, and that will be your quantitative result on how the CAM is working hand in hand with the allopathic medicine.
Well said. Mr. Franco, sorry.
Right, so there were a number of questions happening. So one was that there's this distrust between the modern medicine practitioners and pharmaceutical companies and natural medicine practitioners and so forth. And I think to bring them together, you really have to have political will at the top, and that has to guide. For instance, when we look at China, over 50 years ago, when they found themselves in a bad health situation, Mao implemented training for doctors and the Chinese herbalists to coalesce and work together, and everybody was trained in modern medicine as well as in Chinese traditional medicine. So I think the political will has to be at the top to guide and facilitate this coming together, right? Self-regulation, I think for the practitioners can work at this stage, but there will always be a problem, right? I want to go to the massage therapy. Massage therapy got an act passed to control massage therapists in Trinidad and Tobago, right? I believe in the act they could stop somebody from massaging somebody, have called the police and things like that. I don't know if it's like that in Australia. A herbalist who is not registered in Australia, he can practice, but he may not get the clientele because he's not registered and he doesn't have the health benefits for the insurance companies, for his clients and so forth. So I don't think you need to lock anybody up if they're cracking somebody back in the country somewhere and things like that, right?
If they crack somebody back and they die, they need to lock them up.
And if I want to give you some orange peel tea over the fence and give you some orange peel over the fence, you can't lock me up for that. Or give you some soursop leaves, right? Good. Now, success rate, I get asked that question all the time. What's your success rate? You're going to fix me? You're going to help me? What's your success rate? So my answer is, my success rate is about 99% with patients who do what they have to do and are persistent, because nothing is going to happen overnight, right? And I just want to touch on another thing that you asked, and that was the question where CAM for non-communicable diseases. Of course, CAM works, or natural medicine works wonders in non-communicable chronic diseases as well as acute diseases, right? And the thing with it in these chronic diseases is because it gets to the core of the problem. We're looking for the causative factors of these chronic diseases. Unlike what we do in this sick care system, because it's not a healthcare system that we actually have. We have a sick care system that promotes sickness, right? We have CDAP. CDAP, I tell you, is one of the worst things they ever came up with. Because they're given free medicines. Most of these medicines are thrown away. I see people get them. They say, well, they give it to me, but I don't want to use it. And they take it and they dump it. And they still go and take more the next time when they give them. Right? So CDAP, what CDAP does, it tells you have chronic disease. Your disease is incurable. But chronic disease does not mean that your disease is incurable. It means it's chronic, it's long-lasting, it's more than acute, it's over 6 weeks in period, right? But people get the idea that chronic disease is incurable. And the reason is because modern medicine is very, very poor at treating it because they're not going at the causative factors, right? Then you give somebody these free medicines and say, hey, you have hypertension or arthritis or diabetes, here's your medicine. Take that until you die. Just keep coming and getting it. Right? They don't give them any lifestyle changes, nutritional counseling, mostly generally in the public sick care system.
All right, let me just make an intervention. It's 12:14 and it's a sitting of the House at 1:30. So we have to look to wrap up now. Let Mr. and sorry for the abrupt interruption to your contribution, Mr. Franco. Mr. Ramkisoon, the communicable disease issue, and then we're going to ask each of the stakeholders who've kindly consented to be with us today to make some short winding up comments, and then we can wrap up after that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. So now that we're at the end of the discussion, I will try to bring, at least we've heard from all the complementary medicine people, I'll try to bring it back a little bit to cannabis, which is my area of expertise. Within communicable diseases, again, just to make it short, I hope that all of you all have a copy of the thing that I put forward, so which means you would be able to see from that yes, within cancer, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, there can be used in a wide different there's a number of different ways that cannabis, either from isolated compounds, from compounded compounds, from pure plant extracts, from the pure plant itself, and yes, even to tell you, Mr. Chair, from smoking and from inhalation, which is also a valid method of medicinal treatment through cannabis. So that's to answer your question. Yes, within all communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, sorry, there exists a wide array of treatments using cannabis. Just drawing back quickly, if I can take 3 minutes from your last meeting, can research be done on questions that were raised here? Can research be done into cannabis, other health supplements? Yes. Do we have the resources, the persons, the facilities? Yes. Everything, all of these things need to be guided by regulatory oversight from our government. Whatever acts or regulations is put into place to guiding, coming forward and going forward to guide the alternative medicine framework, again, just make sure there is accountability on the level of the individuals that are going to be recommending, not prescribing, these medicines, so that in case they prescribe or recommend something wrong, again, as you said, you could lock them up, right? Because that is public health we're talking about on persons.
We can pass them through due process. and then if they're found to be culpable, lock them up. This is going to be broadcast,
exactly.
So let's be correct.
I'm just trying to be quick here because I know you have to wind down. The cannabis part and the medicinal cannabis part should not be placed under a Complementary Medicine Act or regulation. It should be a totally separate form of regulations and or act if we want to go that direction. Why? Because it's still a scheduled substance, and as far as my best information shows, even after the Special Assembly next year on marijuana, THC will remain a scheduled substance. And because of this, we have to look from now, foresight is very important into doing regulations to see what we should do and draft from now on going ahead. We can communicate in terms of cannabis, we can communicate easily with the International Narcotics Control Board and make sure that the regulations we are putting forward is under and compliant with those international obligations that we have. This is what we've done in Antigua so far, and so far so good. Haven't had an approval yet from them. I'm waiting to get them approving our proposals. That will be a better thing for the document going forward. In cannabis itself, a lot of the countries were looking at making a lot of revenue from the medical industry. Again, heavy regulation is needed. We've seen Jamaica. Jamaica set their law 3 years ago, and they still haven't exported. They made a big hurrah the other day about their first export. It was only 3 grams. Right now, the ministers can tell you we can export 3 grams, right, because of research sample. They were not able to export any large amount because they did not meet HACCP protocols, hazards and control protocols, and so forth, and or GMP standards. So when they had a big set of products, everybody was waiting kilograms and tons. They tried to export it, and the importing country said, no, you're not meeting standards for a scheduled product. So this is why, again, in forming any regulation, any act, you must take into place which are there plain for us to view the international guidelines and so forth.
We're going to have to leave it there. So if you can wrap up, please.
Yes. In terms of the research in Trinidad, there is a Dr. Farid Youssef. You guys are welcome to look him up, and he has been doing research on marijuana. Farid Youssef, Farid Youssef. He's been conducting research on cannabis in Trinidad legally with the approval of the government. You'll need to check that for the last 15 years. And he's working with School of Medicine, UE. So therefore, they should be aware of this. He's published. There's no GMO, genetically modified cannabis. I corrected that earlier with the herbalist. And finally, you all asked in the last consultation for a policy position paper. I would like you all to enforce that you will get a policy position paper from the Ministry of Health and Cannabis, and especially CBD, because it is being sold right now in pharmacies and popular pharmacies in Trinidad. It is being brought in and distributed, and I can confirm for you that the Drug Inspectorate has not inspected any of these products, which means they should not be on the shelf. I bought the product, taken it with the receipt to third floor Drug Inspectorate, the head of, and she's given me back the receipt. All right, and I had to ask if I brought cannabis, if they'd call the police, or if you'd give it back to me. All right, so something's happening. I went to the CMO, I was directed to the CMO, and the acting CMO said to me they could not answer the question. I was invited to a public health consultation in the ministry for cannabis about a month ago. I raised the question, it wasn't answered. That's about the end of my contribution towards that. Thank you.
But that's the way it has to be. Sorry about that.
Yes, we do need regulation, and the framework has to be set in place. The Herbal Subcommittee with Ministry of Health should be supported in terms of helping with the regulation of the herbals coming in. And we have to have constant communication and education of the medical fraternity so that we can truly help the population of Trinidad and Tobago via using both sides and both branches of medicine.
Thank you for your conciseness, Dr. Gaskin-Myers.
I think what you all did here this morning was quite good. It's the first time I've attended anything like this. Keep up the work. We have communication problems in that sometimes people ask me questions and I'm fighting to answer it based on shared experience and to somebody who doesn't have that experience, and that sometimes could be a bit problematic. So all I'd say is keep up the work. If you want to invite me again, I'll be willing to come and sit and talk again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hazelwood.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Myers here. In my opinion, what goes wrong would come wrong, and I think that medical science is probably on its way out, because based on my experiences with oncologists coming into me, yes, practicing oncologists told me it's not working, but we can't do anything about it. See, and many other factors, many things. I have colleagues abroad, who told me they would have a welcome back party for me. They all died. And they died from the same thing that they were treating, same disease they were treating others for. So the thing is that what is missing If we leave out laughter, meditation, awareness, certain exercises, Qigong, Tai Chi, and all these things, and diet, we would be spending a lot of money bringing in things and not getting the results in the healthy society that we really want. So this must go in. Vibrational medicine must play a very important part. It's like the man who went to the doctor, and the doctor says, you're 80 years now, what do you expect? His right leg was hurting, and the doctor said, you're 80 years, what do you expect? He said, but the left leg is 80 years too, but it doesn't hurt.
Thank you so much, Mr. Franco.
Yes. So thank you again for the opportunity. I have been submitting things to the Food and Drug Division and the Ministry of Health for almost 20 years. And so I did another submission here for you all, a very quick one, because I only got the notice on Friday. And I submit that we should have some self-regulation in the industry for the practitioners. We need to have some regulations on advertising and what people could say on the various media, right? There's some practitioners that I think the medical board could take action, right? I don't know why they're not taking action, right? There are people who are using intravenous things. They're not doctors, and they shouldn't be using needles and things like that. As far as products, I don't think we need to over-scrutinize products that are already coming from developed countries, that are being sold in those countries, that they have GMP, good manufacturing practice, stuff like that. When we do nothing about the local products that people are putting up, very unhygienic in some stores, and that is a real issue, right? And I propose that the listing of products, so products coming in from abroad, we need to have a database on them. Right now, there's no database on the products that's coming in. They look at your entry, they stamp, they deny whatever they do, but there's no database. They can't follow it up. And if we're looking at safety,
15 seconds.
We need to have an adverse reaction hotline. People need to know if something happens to them with a product, a health product or pharmaceutical product, then there's somewhere to call and register that complaint and record it. And if there's a number of that happening, then something is wrong with the product, and they can investigate and they can find on the database
we have to leave it there.
who is the importer of the product, and they can make the necessary recalls and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Amgisun.
Again, thank you. And again, once you guys are looking at oversight, regulation, acts to guide the industry, please make sure there's accountability, as I just said, and as Mr. Franco said. And do realize that there is no need for foreign consultants if you have, in any industry, whether cannabis or not, right, if you have locally qualified persons that are as qualified or more qualified than the foreign experts. And please do, when you're forming the draft regulations and your acts, please do consult with, again, in the complementary medicine seminar with the complementary people, and with cannabis with someone like myself or someone that is qualified. And again, thank you guys for having me. Do guys have a nice day, and thanks. And I think I can speak for all of us saying that in a consultation of this size, there must be a lot more questions that you must have. I do believe all of us would be available if you want our contact information to contact us on a later time, a personal level, so that you can have your or more questions answered if you want. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to take time to thank all of you for coming here today and sharing with us your experiences and your expertise. It was greatly enlightening to me, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the entire committee. I appreciate your presence here, and thank you so much. I will also want to thank members in the public gallery and the media, and those of you viewing and watching when this is broadcast. Thank you so much. This part of the meeting is now adjourned.